I know I make videos like this all the time, and it's not very often that a photo gives me chills. I don't know, there's just like something about seeing a school after dark that I do not like. But this story actually has a very dark backstory. It was taken by a student named Zachary Nicola after he snuck into his school after dark. But if you look to the dead center of the photo, you're gonna notice that something is not right here. And quickly before we dive in, I just have to say thank you to you for making my podcast, Creep Time the Podcast, the top 10 in the country. Huge deal. Top 10 on Spotify, so thank you so much. If you haven't listened, please go click the link in my bio. The student who took the photo, he eventually went missing that night, so they did an emergency break of his iCloud and they found the final photo. In the center of that picture, you would see that he was not alone in that room. When zoomed in, there is clearly a person standing there in the dark. Police never came to know who this person was or why they were involved. This final photo has just become a haunting memory Zachary left behind.
This is one of the scariest ghost stories I've heard, so now everyone's gotta hear it. Back in 2003, there was this group of deployed American Marines who got moved into abandoned military housing that was dubbed Ghost Town. It got the name because apparently the first group of Marines that lived there only made it a week before they couldn't live there anymore. They said they couldn't sleep the entire time they were there. Like all night they would hear the sounds of children laughing, of like footsteps upstairs when there was no one there. I talk about it this week on the podcast, but one night the new group that had moved in had to go out and patrol the area. So they're walking through the neighborhood, like past a bunch of abandoned houses, and then all of a sudden, one of the Marines just starts screaming. He throws his weapon down and just takes off running, like through enemy territory with no weapon. So half of the Marines chase after him, and then the other half turn around to see what he was screaming at. They said that behind them, there was this creature that looked like a shadow come to life. It was really tall and skinny, but they said it had these bright, glowing red eyes. But before they knew what to do, it just vanished. The craziest part is that multiple other people have reported seeing this exact creature like in the area. If you want to hear more of these stories, you gotta check out the podcast this week.
The ending of the story will get you. I promise, it'll get you. This is room 102. A guy named Rowan was in town for a work event and was staying at a local bed and breakfast during his stay. He went to the front desk to check in when he got there, and the woman working told him that on the way to his room, there was a door that was locked that he should avoid. Room 102, no one was allowed in there. Rowan said, okay, went up to his room and fell asleep for the night. The next day, curiosity got the better of him when he passed that room, so he jiggled the door handle, locked. He then bent down so he could look through the keyhole. Inside the room was a woman whose skin was completely white. She was leaning against the wall, facing away from the door. He thought it was strange, but went back to his room. The next day, he walked past the room and decided to look through that keyhole again. This time, all he could see was red. He couldn't make out anything, but it seemed like whoever was in the room blocked the keyhole with something red. He then went down to the front desk to check out and mentioned to the woman that he looked into the forbidden room. She sighed and said, well, I might as well tell you the full story. She said, a long time ago, a guest mysteriously passed in that room and her ghost haunts it, so they had to close it to the public. But the strange thing was, she wasn't an ordinary woman. She had pale white skin, except for her eyes, which were red. I told you, the ending would get you.
You would never stick around in a school library at night, and this is the exact reason. This picture was captured by Jalen Nell. She was in her school library, and this is the entrance point, and she's in there at like 2 something in the morning, and she thought she was completely alone. Until she realized that there was another woman in this library, and she was being watched. She ends up deciding to leave because she feels uncomfortable, but before she does, she takes this photo of the entrance to send to her friend and tell her about this creepy woman. But I want to look at this photo a little closer. In the frame, she had unknowingly captured the woman who was staring directly at the camera. This visual is chilling. Jalen would actually end up reporting this incident to Student Affairs, who then checked the camera footage at the entrance of the library. What really unnerved them is that when they looked at the footage, they never saw this person leave the library. And if you guys are loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta.
This story will send a chill down your spine. This is the ride. A guy named Brad moved to a small town in Georgia and was settling in, meeting his new neighbors. And he learned that most of the residents there believed that one of the back roads that led in and out of town was haunted. But Brad didn't believe in ghosts, so he never really asked much about it. One day, he went to visit a buddy who lived an hour outside of town. The two ended up going to dinner and stayed out late, much later than he had planned. And by the time he left for home, it was late, around midnight. As he was driving, the road was pitch black. He could barely even see ahead of him. He was almost home when he squinted to see a woman walking along the road alone. Normally, he would have driven past, but it was late and it was about to start storming any second, so he decided to offer her a ride. She got into his car and held her hands up to the vents to capture the warmth, eventually taking off her jacket when she warmed up. And it was good timing as it started storming as soon as she got in the car. She thanked Brad for picking her up and said her name was Eve and directed him to her home. Eve was kind and just seemed lost. They eventually pulled up to her house, she thanked him again, and she went inside. But when Brad got home, he discovered that she had left her jacket in his car. He wanted to return it, so the next morning he drove back to the house where he dropped her off and rang the bell. An older woman answered the door, and he handed her the jacket. Brad said, "I gave your daughter Eve a ride home last night, and she left this in my car." It was then the woman began to cry. As she wiped away the tears, the woman said, "My daughter Eve was struck by a hit-and-run driver years ago. It happened on that back road, and when she was hit, she was wearing a jacket just like this one." After that, Brad became a believer and knew why all the locals spoke so often of that road being haunted. He just had no idea that he would end up giving that ghost a ride home.
What the heck is this?
Mysterious creature floats in a river near a village in Indonesia. Measuring at 23 meters long and 4 meters wide, it is said that many people were going missing when they went into the river.
I have no words. I'm never swimming ever again. No. If you want more Unsolved Mysteries, then check out my YouTube video. I just dropped this one, and we talk about a whole bunch of scary unsolved cases. Link in bio.
One of the most beautiful and one of the most haunted. In 1892, a mysterious young woman who only identified herself as Lottie A. Bernard checked into San Diego's Hotel del Coronado. She arrived on Thanksgiving Day alone. She was using a fake name and said she was meeting a gentleman there. And many believed that this was a secret lover. But days passed and this gentleman never showed. Hotel staff found the mystery woman lying near the beach one day. She had decided to end it all. Police realized that Lottie Bernard didn't exist and couldn't find anything to positively ID the woman. And through newspapers, she became simply known as the Beautiful Stranger. She was later ID'd as 24-year-old Kate Morgan. And ever since, hotel visitors and employees alike have reported ghostly encounters. Coincidentally, many of them in Kate Morgan's room, hearing a woman's voice, footsteps, TV, and lights flickering on and off. Most chillingly, the ghost of Kate Morgan herself has been seen in the hallways and along the shore where she passed. To this day, the story of Kate Morgan, the Beautiful Stranger, fascinates guests, and her room is the most requested in the hotel. I visited the Hotel del Coronado a few years back, and it is one of the most beautiful hotels, but I didn't see Kate. Have you ever been, and if so, have you spotted the Beautiful Stranger?
Does something seem a little off about this photo? Danielle Berner, she's at work, her kids are at school, and she gets a ring notification saying that there was motion detected in her daughter's bedroom. It's like virtually impossible to tell that anything's even wrong with this picture. I couldn't even tell that there was something wrong with it until I looked at the bottom right of that bed. There's someone hiding under her daughter's bed. And unfortunately, she didn't catch this either, so she would end up coming home that evening after work. By the time her daughters got back from school, they were the first to find the remains of their mother. And even with this, a digitally enhanced version of the footage provided by police, they have never found who it was who was under that bed. And if you are loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta.
Unsolved Mysteries Part 6. This is the story of the Mary Celeste. In 1872, Captain Briggs, his family, and a few crew members set sail out of the New York harbor for Genoa, Italy. They had 6 months' provisions and a few luxuries in the ship, including an upright piano. Captain Briggs and his family never returned. The ship was seen in early December of that same year, drifting outside of Portugal. They never made it to their destination. Upon investigation, the ship was empty and the lifeboat was gone. Other than a few things being thrown around in the captain's quarters, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The last entry in the captain's log didn't indicate any kind of disaster. No one knows what happened. Over the years, there have been some crazy theories about what happened, including pirates, mutiny, and sea monsters. But the truth about what happened has never come out. And the bodies of Briggs, his family, and the crew have never been found.
Have you heard the terrifying story of the train track man? And yes, this is a true story. In 2006 in Wisconsin, a girl was hanging out with her boyfriend after school one day. The weather was great and they didn't have any other plans, so they thought they would go walk the train tracks on the west side of town. The track is situated with miles of woods on either sides and no one else around, and at this point the sun is about to set and the two begin walking down the tracks. They passed some boxcars and got further and further down the tracks. And 15 or so minutes into their walk, they got this sudden urge to look up. And they see it. A half-mile down, standing directly in the middle of the tracks, was the shape of a person, but this figure was unnaturally tall, standing stiff, arms at both sides. "What is that? We need to go," they said as they grabbed hands and spun back around towards the direction they came. They walked briskly for about a minute, and then the girl turned around to see this figure was now much closer. It was like he suddenly jumped half the distance between where he originally was. The girl screamed and then they began sprinting, and a few moments later, she sneaked another look back over her shoulder. And there he was, now only one boxcar away. The unnaturally tall person was mere feet from them. They continued sprinting, refusing to look back until they finally made it back to their car and frantically jumped inside. They looked back up towards the dark tracks, but there was no one in sight. In years since, the two grew apart, but frequently sent each other Slender Man articles, as the legend resembles the figure that they saw that night to a T. The Slender Man only moves towards you when you aren't looking. Maybe he's more than just a legend. What are your thoughts on this story and the Slender Man? For more mysteries, check out the podcast, YouTube channel, and Instagram.
Can we please talk about this picture? Okay, this was from a home security camera. It was captured in 2015 because that tricycle that you're seeing kept showing up in this person's backyard. So the context of this is that this is one of those cameras that doesn't take video. It like captures a still every few seconds, and sure enough, the tricycle appears. But look at the background. The more I looked at this, the more I lost my mind. Those are feet. Those are feet of a person who is standing there in this shot in the background. Even the homeowner, John Coleman, he didn't even catch that when he was looking at the background. Somebody had to point that out to him when he looked at the footage. What's even crazier is that this didn't even help. They never caught who was doing this. So who was this person and why were they leaving that tricycle? And as always, if you guys are loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta.
This scary story will instantly transport you right back to childhood. Terrifying. This is the green ribbon. Once there was a girl named Jenny. She was like all the other girls except one thing. She always wore a green ribbon around her neck. There was a boy named Alfred in our class. Alfred liked Jenny and Jenny liked Alfred. One day he asked her, "Why do you wear that ribbon all the time?" "I can't tell you," Jenny told him, but Alfred kept asking, and Jenny told him it isn't important. Jenny and Alfred grew up and fell in love. One day they got married, and after the wedding, Alfred said, "Now we are married, you must tell me why you wear the green ribbon." "You must wait," said Jenny. "I will tell you when the right time comes." Years passed, and Alfred and Jenny grew old. One day, Jenny became really sick, and the doctor told her this was the end. Jenny called Alfred to her side and said, "Alfred, now I can tell you about the green ribbon. Untie, and you will see why I couldn't tell you before." Slowly and carefully, Alfred untied the ribbon, and Jenny's fell right off. I am 30 years old. The way this story has stuck with me, traumatizing, but in a good way. The green ribbon is from the book In a Dark, Dark Room and Other Scary Stories by Alvin Schwartz. Do you remember this story from childhood?
We could be oceans, never drifting apart. We could be endless, flow through my heart. If you wanna ride my waves, if you wanna ride my waves, if you wanna ride my waves, if you wanna ride my waves.
Was lost in highs, pushing you aside. I couldn't let you back in. But now I'm ready to fix all those careless lips. Wishing we could start rebuilding. Don't wanna let